My favorite character in Unexpected Journey is that goblin messenger on his little harness. Look at that thing go! The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey is directed by Peter Jackson and stars Martin Freeman, Ian McKellen, Richard Armitrage, Cate Blanchett, Hugo Weaving, and Annie Strickis. It is a prequel to The Lord of the Rings and tells the story of a young Bilbo who is swept into an adventure by the wizard Gandalf and decides to go help a company of dwarves reclaim the kingdom of Erebor from the terrible dragon Smaug. The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey was probably one of my most anticipated movies when it first came out back in 2012. I was super excited to see this film. The Lord of the Rings are my favorite movies of all time. It's my favorite trilogy of all time, so I was pumped. I was ready to go in the theater, and I remember watching the first trailer of An Unexpected Journey, which is one of my favorite trailers of all time. Every time I see the next December popping on the screen, just brings me home, and it even makes me excited to watch the movie again. I love this trailer. I think this trailer is really fantastic. If you expect me to trash talk the Hobbit trilogy and just say everything that's wrong about it, this isn't the video for you. I am one of the people that actually like the Hobbit trilogy. I think that it's fun, it's exciting, it's a good adventure series, and while it's nowhere near as great as The Lord of the Rings, I think that it's got really some good aspects and quality acting. The actors here are phenomenal, and the movies take me back to the world of Middle Earth superbly. I'm drawn into them, and I love watching them. And I think that they are really underrated films. I really like Unexpected Journey and The Desolation of Smaug and The Battle of the Five Armies. I like all three of them, even though they should have been 2 movies instead of 3. I like all 3 of the films. I think that Peter Jackson did the best that he could considering the situation he was in. He arrived late into the project, and the studios did not want to change the release date, and they should have. I just don't understand this mentality of the studio just not wanting to push the movie back. The movie could have been pushed back a year and it would have made much difference. It would have probably made a better movie, but it's got some slow parts. I think that it takes a little too long to get going. The Shire sequence, the beginning takes a little while to get going, but other than that, there are a few bad CGI moments here and there, which I'll talk about during this video, and some tone issues. Sometimes it's really super serious, and other times it's got some really kid humor, and the tone shifts back and forth, and sometimes the movie doesn't really know what it wants to be. Doesn't want it to be like the Hobbit book, like a children's book, or doesn't want to be just like the Lord of the Rings. Sometimes I think that the tone is in conflict with itself, but I think that the movie is really super entertaining. It's got just beautiful cinematography. It would have been interesting to see Guillermo del Toro direct this movie. He was supposed to direct at first, but then he dropped out at the last moment, and then Peter Jackson was probably the first true runner-up. He got the job. He decided to direct the first 2 movies. At the time there were supposed to be 2 Hobbit films, and then the third one really was announced. I think it was announced at the end of 2012, just a month before the movie was going to be released. It would have been interesting to see Guillermo del Toro's version. Maybe it would have been for the best if he had stayed on, because Peter Jackson was really rushed into the production and he never felt on top of things. He was quoted in saying because Guillermo del Toro had to leave and I jumped in and took over, we didn't wind and the clock back a year and a half and gave me a year and a half prepped to design the movie, which was different to what he was doing. It was impossible, and as a result of it being impossible, I just started shooting the movie with most of it not prepped at all. You're going to a set and you're winging it. You've got these massively complicated scenes, no storyboards, and you're making it up there and then on the spot. I think that it's a miracle that The Hobbit ended up being as good as it was, and it shows how good of a director Peter Jackson actually is. Like, I don't agree with every decision that he made in the Hobbit films. I agree with most of the decisions he made in Lord of the Rings, but like there are some things in The Hobbit that are questionable, and I think that it's because Peter Jackson was really just thrown in the production, and he didn't have time to do what he wanted. He could have made, I think, much better films if he actually like had an extra year to work on them. I think that he would have helped tremendously, but as it stands, like, the movies are still great. I think that the movies are still really entertaining. Doing these movies without storyboards, I feel like, would have been like almost impossible, but Peter Jackson did it. I just love the characters of this movie. The characters, especially like the main three. Martin Freeman is simply perfect as Bilbo Baggins. I thought that he was really just fantastic, and he really brings like his own personality to the role, but at the same time he just imitates Ian Holmes really well. He is just phenomenal in this role. Martin Freeman is a really just a wonderful actor, and he was perfect for Bilbo. Ian McKellen is really just awesome here as Gandalf. He is probably my favorite part of the entire trilogy. Gandalf is my favorite Lord of the Rings character, and it's great to see him as Gandalf the Grey again, and I think that it's Ian McKellen's favorite Gandalf role. Like, he prefers Gandalf the Grey over Gandalf the White, and he just relishes in this role, and I love seeing Ian McKellen back as a Gandalf here. Richard Armitrage is absolutely terrific as Thorin. Thorin here is really a badass character. He is the leader of the company of the dwarves, and he wants to reclaim his homeland at any cost. He wants to go against Mog, the terrible dragon, and he wants to become king of Ermor once again, king under the mountain. And I think that Richard Armitrage is really fantastic here. The other dwarves, I think that they're okay. Like, they're just to provide some comedic relief. They're not as strong as the Fellowship in like the Fellowship of the Ring. Like, the characters here aren't as well written or as interesting. I think that Balin is probably my favorite dwarf other than Thorin. Balin, I think, was really well done. I think he's the most fleshed out. Like, he's the wisest dwarf of them all. Like, he's the oldest as well. Philly and Killy are okay, but the others are just like there to be in the company, and they don't have much to them. And I don't really blame like Jackson for this at all. I think I blame more Tolkien, because like there's so many dwarves, like there's 13 dwarves, but like they're not really expanded on at all in the books. And I think that in the book there should have been like moments between the dwarves, and there should have been like a bit of character development with them. But other than that, I like this company. I think that spending more times in the dwarves in The Hobbit, I think, is a good idea, because we don't really see much of the dwarves at all in Lord of the Rings, except for like Gimli. So we get more dwarves here, we get more context with the dwarves and the elves, and like we sort of understand why they don't like each other. So like I said, like the beginning of the movie I think is really good. It's nice being back in the Shire, and then we like get this introduction from Bilbo. We see the history of Erebor, and we learn how like the dragon gets control of the kingdom, and like he burns the town. We see Frodo again. Like, Frodo I think was a nice touch, but like I think we see him a little too much. I think it would have been better. It's just like seeing him for like 20 seconds or something like that. Like, there are some moments here that I think that are drawn out in the beginning of An Unexpected Journey, and I think that it was because like Peter Jackson wanted to make it a trilogy, and I think if he would have stuck to two, the pacing of this movie would have been a lot better. I think the pacing could have been tighter, and don't get me started with like the 48 frames per second nonsense. I think the 48 frames per second was really just a bad move for this movie. Should have been just released in 24 frames per second. Like, nobody really is asking for more films in 48 frames per second. I think that was like a bad move on the studio's part. I get like that they wanted to just try out this new technology, but like, don't try it on The Hobbit. Try it on something different. The Hobbit is like too special of a movie to try this new technology. It didn't work, and people just rejected it, and I'm glad, because I hate the 48 frames per second nonsense. But I like that it follows the book closely. I love the introduction between Bilbo and Gandalf. Like, it's almost word for word from the book. Like, Gandalf introduces himself and like Gandalf means me. It's such a great moment, and then he marks the Bilbo's door so that the dwarves know which house they're looking for, and then the dwarves like arrive one after the other inside Bilbo's home. They create chaos for Bilbo. It gives me this warm feeling inside, just with like the music. The soundtrack of Unexpected Journey is one of my favorite parts of the movie. Songs are just like so inviting. Concerning hobbits is one of my favorite Lord of the Rings themes ever. And so, yeah, the dwarves make themselves right at home, and of course Bilbo doesn't like that, and they sort of start singing. They throw each other the plates. At least they don't break any, and they eat most of Bilbo's food. They have a good time until Thorin arrives, and Thorin immediately brings this serious tone. He just is a serious character. He doesn't really joke like the others. I think that he's way too concentrated on his quest. He wants Erebor. And so he arrives out there trying to convince Bilbo to come. And he gives Bilbo this contract, which is a bit ridiculous. Like, Bilbo doesn't really need to sign his contract. All he has is his will to go with them. Like, doesn't make any sense. He can just like leave the company whenever he wants. So like, I don't get why there's a contract. It's probably like this in the book too. I don't really remember if he gives them a contract, but like, it doesn't work. And the dwarves sing this epic song, which might just be my favorite moment in the film, was when they're singing like the Misty Mountains Cold. It's just a really fantastic moment. Like, it just draws you into this adventure, and I think it worked really well with drawing Bilbo into this adventure, because this is what made Bilbo actually want to join the company. It's this song, just a fantastic song.
Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old.
And of course, Bilbo decides to join the company. He awakens in the next morning. He finds all the dwarves gone, and then he decides to join them. He just runs out of the front door, and he runs after them, and he meets Thorin and Gandalf and the rest of the 13 dwarves. And some of them had even made bets if to see if Bilbo was going to join them, but Gandalf probably won most of the bets. And so they venture into the unknown, into the wild, and immediately you get this fellowship feel, the Fellowship of the Ring feel. I just love seeing these characters head out on a quest. Such an epic feeling. These movies I absolutely love because of the feeling that I get when I see these characters just leave home and head out into the wild. The bad guys here are really just a bunch of orcs. They're led by Azog, the white orc. At first I wasn't really too on board with the white orc. I didn't love his look, but I think that now his look shows how different he is. It works for the film. I love Manu Bennett's performance. I think that Manu Bennett's performance as Azog is really great, and he looks menacing. I really like him as one of Sauron's servant. I think he works well with the film, and it gives like the movie an extra sense of urgency that they're after like our heroes. I like this part of the movie. It's also different from like the Fellowship of the Ring, when the Black Riders were after the Fellowship. Here, I think that it works that we have like a different like threat to deal with. And so while they travel, the Hobbit and the dwarves, they meet the trolls, which we see in the Lord of the Rings. Like Bilbo tells the young kids about the trolls, which turn to stone, and they get caught. They almost like get cooked, but Bilbo has this magnificent idea to like stall for time, so he just like tells the trolls that they shouldn't cook the dwarves because they have worms in their tubes and they're not eatable, and it's really a great scene. Like some of the humor of the scene doesn't work for me, like when the troll like just uses Bilbo to wipe his nose. Like I don't really like that moment. I think that it like puts me out of the film like every time. Bilbo manages to stall for time and he saves the dwarves. Like Gandalf arrives and the trolls turn into stone. Gandalf had left like a couple hours earlier because like he just was tired of Thorin's bullshit. And like the dwarves can really be like annoying, and they can really be like a pain in the ass. I'm sure like I wouldn't really enjoy their company. I would much prefer the company of the Fellowship. The Fellowship's company, I think, would have been much better. But actually, Bilbo had more fun than Frodo did on his adventure. And so the company, they find like this cave, the Troll Cave, and Gandalf picks up a sword, the Glamdring. He picks up a sword, well, it's sort of dagger, and he gives Bilbo the sword, which he later names Sting. The swords are from the city of Gondolin, which is an elf city from the First Age. It's like this beautiful white kingdom. It's a really beautiful city. So, meanwhile, we learn a little bit more about Radagast the Brown. And Radagast the Brown here, I think, is a little too over the top. He reminds me a bit of Jar Jar Binks. I don't think that he's that bad as Jar Jar Binks, but I think that he should have been a little bit darker. I don't really like how like there's like bugs coming out of his mouth and he has birds in his hair. It's just ridiculous. I would have preferred him like to be a little darker. He could have been like a little bit crazy. That's fine. Like put him a little bit crazy, and he takes care of animals, which is cool. He discovers that there's a sickness in the forest in Greenwood, and he learns that there's like this necromancer and Dolguldur that does like dark magic, and he gives Gandalf like a sword like that belonged to the Witch King. And so the company, they're attacked by the orcs and wargs, and they're chased down in this like sort of hole, and they are saved by the elves, and they head out in this like tunnel, and they find Rivendell. Like Bilbo senses that there's magic around them, and that's curious because like, can elves do magic? I guess they can. I didn't know that they could. Like they're not wizards, but I guess they can do magic. So, but what's the magic for? Is it to keep Rivendell like invincible to the other people that go by there? That's possible. They head into Rivendell, and of course, like the dwarves, they don't really want to tell Elrond about their quest. Thorin is like wary about Elrond. He doesn't trust him, but eventually he agrees because like Elrond is the only one that can read his map. And so Elrond helps Thorin decipher his map, and he tells Thorin that they need to be at Erebor like at the last day of autumn so that the light can shine on the door, on the secret doorway to the kingdom of Erebor. And then we get this fantastic scene of the meeting between the White Council. Gandalf meets Galadriel. This White Council consists of Galadriel, Gandalf, Elrond, and Saruman. Saruman just seems like a dick in this scene. I don't know why they played it like that. I don't think that Saruman was converted by Sauron at this moment in time. I don't think that he was a servant of the Dark Lord. It's just weird that like he is really opposing Gandalf's ideas, and he just doesn't want to believe that Sauron is coming back, and so Gandalf just like puts the dagger on the table, and Galadriel asks him like to show what he brought telepathically, and then he just puts the dagger on the table. He removes the cloth, and then we see that it's the sword of the Witch King of Angmar. That right there is an enormous red flag, but like Saruman doesn't want to believe shit. He doesn't believe Gandalf at all. And he's a dick throughout the scene, and I just don't understand why. Was he ever good? Was he ever like a competent wizard? He just doesn't seem competent to me in this scene at all. And so I doesn't want to agree with Gandalf. And the White Council is over, and then Galadriel and Gandalf, they talk about it, and she tells him that he needs to go see what is going on. He needs to go investigate Dol Guldur. And I just love this moment between Gandalf and Galadriel. It's so well shot too. Like these are some of the moments that I think Jackson nailed in the Hobbit trilogy. And she asks him like, why did you bring Bilbo Baggins? Like she doesn't really understand his decision, and he replies beautifully. He says, I don't know. Saruman believes it is only great power that can hold evil in check, but that is not what I have found. I found that it isn't the small things, everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keeps the darkness at bay. Simple acts of kindness and love. Why Bilbo Baggins? Perhaps it is because I am afraid, and he gives me courage. Gandalf's quotes are like really something special. They can be useful in life, especially when you're having like a terrible day or a terrible year even. Like Gandalf quotes are really inspirational, and I also love the quote that he gives to Bilbo just like a couple of minutes in the movie before that, where he says like, true courage is knowing not when to take a life but when to spare one. This leads Bilbo in making like the decision later on to not kill someone in the movie. It's just really great stuff. Like Gandalf is one badass wizard. So the company decides to leave Rivendell without like warning Elrond or Gandalf. They leave without Gandalf. I think that Bilbo like takes a little too much shit without like saying anything from Thorin, but whatever. They head out into the mountains, and this is like probably the worst part in the movie is this scene where they like arrive in this just thunder battle between these two rock giants, and this scene is completely useless. You really didn't need it. You just like could have shown them arrive into the goblin caves, and that's it. Like you didn't need an extra scene here, and it takes me out of the movie. I just don't like it. It looks really just it looks ugly as well. Like I don't like watching this scene. It should have been like an extended cut of the movie, like in the extended editions. But it feels really just cheap, and I don't like watching this scene. And then they all make it out alive. They're like, they don't even have a scratch on them, which happens a little too often in these movies where the dwarves like they make it out alive in every situation, and they're not really just harmed or just bruised. They're just fine, and I think that takes away a little of the tension or the stakes of the Hobbit films. But nevertheless, they arrive in the Goblin Caves, and I think that this part of the movie is awesome. Like, they arrive there, and they try to spend the night in this cave. Bilbo decides to leave because he doesn't feel welcome. He feels like Thorin doesn't want him there. But, like, one of the dwarves is still awake, and he tries to, like, argue with Bilbo, and like he doesn't want Bilbo to leave, and tells Bilbo like that he understands Bilbo, but Bilbo tells the dwarf like, you don't understand, like you don't have a home. And I think that he didn't really mean that. He just when something you say when you don't really think, and you blur out something that you don't really mean. And I don't think that Bilbo meant that at all. So Bilbo notices that his sword is turning blue, and the dwarves, they fall down the cave. Thorin, it was like, oh, he's awake. He realizes that something is wrong. They fall down, and they are like caught by goblins. This entire sequence, I think, is really funny. It's just well done. It's too much CGI. Yeah, I think that there's too much EI in this scene, but I think it's badass. They're just really like thousands of goblins, and they need to escape. I don't love the look of the Goblin King, but I like the character. Like, I think that the look feels way too unreal to me. It just doesn't look convincing enough. Like just look at the trolls from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Like the trolls in those movies, they look really convincing, but here it just looks too cartoony for me. But I like the character. The character is funny, and I think that he was well written. But I just like the look of him. And so, like, they're just about to be, like, ripped to shreds, and then they are saved by someone. Like, there's this huge wave of energy, this huge wave of light that appears, and this moment is absolutely badass. Like, Gandalf arrives, and he yells, like, "Take up your arms, fight!"
Take up arms. Fight!
Sweeps you up, and the dwarves, that they immediately like just start fighting off the goblins, and it's really great stuff. From then on, it's like this race outside of the goblin tunnels. They almost head out of the caves, but then like the goblin king, he just stops them. He arrives from like the ground, and he just tells them like, you think you were gonna escape, and then Gandalf just hits him with his staff first, and then he slices the goblin's chest, and like the sword really like cut through fat, and it's like pretty gross. Like there are some gross moments in this movie. It's just funny that like the Hobbit is based on like a children's book, but there are some pretty gross moments throughout the entire film. And the dwarves and Gandalf, they just try to escape this terrible place, and I think the way it ends is really too silly. It just really shows like how Peter Jackson, I don't think, was really prepared for this movie, because like it just ends really anticlimactic. They just fall down on this like big sort of bridge, and they just make it out alive without any scratch, and it just feels completely ridiculous. I would have tried to have found like another way for them to escape, and then like they receive the big goblin king like on top of them. And so Bilbo gets separated from the dwarves meanwhile, and he has this encounter with this creature named Gollum, who we all know from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Gollum has the magic ring, the one ring, and he wants to eat Bilbo, but Bilbo decides to have a game of riddles with Gollum. And while the riddles are really like easy, they're really easy to answer. I think that they're a little too easy, but this scene is great. Like, I love seeing Andy Serkis and Martin Freeman play off each other. It's clear that they both have like an amazing time with one another, and I love just seeing them together on screen. They're just wonderful actors. Andy Serkis is great once again as Gollum. He is just perfect for the role, and I love this entire sequence. And so they arrive at like the final riddle question, and Bilbo asks Gollum like what is in his pockets, and Gollum realizes that his ring is gone, and he realizes that Bilbo has gotten his ring, and of course this makes Gollum super angry. Gollum is incredibly angry. He comes after Bilbo, and Bilbo just gets the hell out of there. He escapes, but then while he falls down, the ring falls on one of his fingers, and he becomes invincible. He realizes that the ring can turn him invincible, and so like he has the opportunity to kill Gollum, but remembering like what Gandalf told him, he decides not to. And I think that he probably would have if Gandalf would have said that quote. Like he probably would have killed him. And he sees like Gollum crying a bit, and so he decides not to kill the creature. This moment is fantastic and perhaps the most crucial Lord of the Rings moment, because this selfless act is extremely important. Bilbo sparing Gollum is one of the most significant lessons in all Tolkien lore, simply because it's the little things that everyday people ought to do that will help save the world. And that moment when Bilbo decides not to kill Gollum is what saves Middle Earth. And like he just kicks him in the face and he leaves. He follows the other dwarves out of the tunnels, and so he meets up with them in the forest, and then Bilbo gives them this like heartwarming speech, and he tells them that like he knows, he understands that they don't have a home, and he misses his own home. He misses his armchair, his books, his garden, but he will do whatever he can to help dwarves reclaim their home. He will do whatever he can. It's a great moment of the movie. It's just really well done. There's some great character moments in The Hobbit. I wish there was a little more of them, but I think that there are great moments between these characters. So yeah, the orcs, they follow the dwarves in the forest, and then they are pursued on this cliff. And I love that, like the line that Thorin says, "Out of the frying pan," and then Gandalf says, into the fire," which is like chapters of the Hobbit book. I think that was a really nice little detail. And so they head out on this cliff, and they start climbing the trees so that the wargs, they can't really get to them. And Gandalf, he uses like fire. He throws them like these sort of bombs, and they make it impossible for the orcs to come after them. And then Thorin sees Azog, this incredibly just terrible, just this awful orc that he wants to kill. And then Thorin, he goes after Azog. But Thorin gets his ass kicked almost immediately by the warg. And I love this moment where like Bilbo goes to save Thorin. Like it shows how much Bilbo appreciates Thorin, and he saves his life. Like if he wouldn't have done that, like the wolf would have eaten Thorin. But like Bilbo saves his life. And one other thing, like I don't really like the song that they chose to put when Thorin decides to go fight Azog, because like it like the Black Riders theme in the Lord of the Rings, it just feels off to me. Thorin isn't really a bad guy, so I don't really understand why they decide to give the Black Riders theme to Thorin. It's almost like they didn't have another team to give him. Like they were running out of time, and they decided just to give like the Black Riders theme to Thorin, which really doesn't make sense. But whatever. The Thorin, he gets saved by Bilbo, and then Gandalf calls out the eagles for help. And the eagle, they're used sparingly. Like you could make the case that they're used a little too often in these movies, and I wouldn't like argue with you. They're just like this cheap device for the characters to escape. And yeah, they escape on the eagles because like it was probably just the only way for them to get out of this situation. And of course, Azog is angry. He wants revenge. And the eagles, they bring Thorin and Bilbo and the other dwarves and Gandalf to safety on this like mountain peak. And Gandalf heals Thorin. And of course, Thorin acts like he's all angry at Bilbo. He just like tells Bilbo like, "Why do you come with us? Why do you come with this company? Like you've been lost ever since you've left home." But of course, he was thankful to Bilbo. Like he says like, "Oh, and I've never been so wrong," and he gives Bilbo a hug. And of course it's sweet, and like I like that their relationship develops throughout the course of the movie. and the other two of them are friends. And I really love Richard Armitrage's performance. I think that Richard Armitrage's performance is really one of the best parts of this entire film. And so the movie leaves us there. Like, our heroes are on this mountain. How are they gonna get down from there? I have no idea. But yeah, they can see Erebor off in the horizon in the distance, and we see like this bird coming near the mountain. And, like, it just like makes this small noise on the mountainside. We see it inside the mountain. This like giant treasure. Like, the small bird awoke Smaug. Like, Smaug was taking a long nap, and we see his eye opening, and all it took for Smaug to waken up is this like just small bird. I think this movie is really fun. It's got really great action scenes, wonderful characters. It's got some questionable moments, questionable CGI. I don't think it's as good as The Lord of the Rings, but I just think that it's really a wonderful adventure film, really great fantasy epic, and I am swept in it from the beginning to end, and I really enjoy this movie overall. I'd give this movie a B+. I am a fan of The Hobbit and an Unexpected Journey, and yeah, I'm looking forward to talk about Desolation of Smaug and Battle of the Five Armies. So please let me know what you think about Hobbit and Unexpected Journey down below, and please like, comment, subscribe, and see you next time.